Hey everybody, it's Party Elite here with another episode of Total Breakdown. Today we finish off our series between Xiphos and RomulanDawg with the former leading Bretonnia against the Dark Elves of the latter. We begin, of course, with a discussion of composition and deployment and some interesting preemptive picking going on both sides of the field. Let's start with the Bretonnians here being led by a King Warhammer up in the air, as well as a Damsel of Life on foot. Up front you can see we've got some peasant mob here and over here with men-at-arms on either flank as well. Then we've got these 4 units of peasant bowmen, and right behind them we've got a unit of foot squires on either flank, and the Holy Wardens of La Maison right in the middle over here, Battle Pilgrim Regiment of Renown. Then back here you can see we've got some field trebuchet ready to push forward and start firing away right from the get-go, and then we've got 2 units of Grail Knights and the Knights of the Lionhearted back here. So a fair bit of magical damage output among the cavalry back here, and also with the Holy Wardens of La Maison. And that's not a bad idea at all, given that the Dark Elves typically bring a fair bit of physical resistance to the field, and you want to try and counter that. And perhaps expecting that the Dark Elves have done the opposite and have brought very little physical resistance. Actually, we have a Supreme Sorceress of Shadows in charge over here. You can see we've got these 4 units of Dread Spears forming a pseudo front line. We've got the Cold One Chariot up front as well, armor piercing in range and in melee as well, with the anti-infantry in melee, while you can see we've got 2 units of Reaper Bolt Throwers back here already firing away from range. Great artillery pieces, trying to get some damage done before lines even meet. And then we've got these Witch Elves tucked away in the trees, and they are the first piece of physical resistance we're seeing from the Dark Elves. And back here, 2 units of Cold One Knights and another pair of Cold One Knights in the trees alongside Slaanesh's Harvesters, the other unit with physical resistance among the Dark Elves. And back here we've got the Hellebranai bringing up the rear, while all the way off in the distance you can see we have the Dark Riders with shields over here, willing to sort of close the gap and shut down any artillery pieces or range units that the Bretonnians might leave behind. So with all that said and done, let's take a look at how this all breaks down as the Bretonnians push forth. WH2 as well, pushing forward, trying to get some work done, try to get some scouting done, I think, while the Reaper Bolt Throwers firing away at the Peasant Bowmen over here, doing a fair bit of damage to health and to morale. But it's rather amazing to see the resilience of the Peasant here, as despite getting all of that artillery fire, they continue to just stand up and keep walking. They're still 68 for 68 in terms of individual count, and though their morale has dropped to 50% and their health has dropped by about 10%, they're still marching on. So rather impressive to see, but not a bad pick there at all, using the Reaper Bolt Thrower to try and shut down that range support, because again, it can bring not only damage to health but also to morale. So not a bad pick at all, just trying to eliminate one of these peasant bowmen before they're able to close the gaps over here. And you can see the Cold One Chariot as well, tempting fate a little bit, trying to get some shots into, I think, the peasant mob back here, but WH2 of course has something to say about that, decides to dive right into the Cold One Chariot. The Cold One Chariot trying to pull back into safety, but WH2 is able to close that gap. Well, over here as well, you can see we've got the field trebuchet firing away at these Dread Spears. A good target being presented here by the Dread Spears, probably the best target that's available right now, so might as well get these shots in and cause a little bit of damage right in the middle over here, perhaps open up a gap or weaken the center so that the Bretonnians are able to push through and shut down the Reaper Bolt Throwers. Not a bad call whatsoever. And meanwhile, you can see off in the distance, of course, these Dark Riders pushing forward, trying to close the gap towards the field trebuchet. The Knights of the Lionhearted are still back there, so they are quite threatening as they are anti-large. But if they decide to push forward, then the field trebuchet is wide open for the taking. You can see, meanwhile, on the topic of artillery, the Reaper Bolt Throwers have kind of switched up their targeting. This one is still firing away at the Peasant Bowmen over here, while this one is now firing at these Peasant Bowmen again, just trying to spread that love a little bit, while over here you can see we have WH2 chasing after the Cold One Chariot, and so these Cold One Knights are trying to close the gap to WH2, try to shut him down as he is right there, juicy, ripe for the picking, but we have these Grail Knights pushing in to respond, so the Cold One Knights decide better of staying engaged over here. They decide to pull back into safety, and these Dread Spears get sent in instead, and WH2 uses Foe Seeker to pull back into safety if he needs to, while you can see over here we have all of these Peasant Bowmen firing away, trying to eliminate the Reaper Bolt Throwers, and that's not a bad call either. Again, you want to try and remove range support, you want to try and remove artillery as quickly as possible, so using the Peasant Bowmen to actually scare off the Reaper Bolt Thrower crew is not a terrible call. And again, back here you can see the Dark Riders as well pushing in to try and remove artillery on the Bretonnian side of the field, and as these shots are coming through from the Peasant Bowmen, you can see we have the Dread Spears here closing the gaps, and we also have the Knights of the Lionhearted hit by Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma, not only slowing them down, but also causing a fair bit of damage to them as they kind of bring around the back over here. And over here you can see we have the Dark Riders pushing in towards the field trebuchet, tossing the crew right up in the air, throwing them back and doing a great deal of damage. Good work there, Vanguard deploying these Dark Riders, keeping them off in the corner, waiting for all of the anti-large and defensive capabilities of the Bretonnians to push forward, and then coming in to just shut down that artillery piece. Now, It could be argued that the Knights of the Lionhearted should have stayed back here to protect the Field Trebuchet from just this situation, but perhaps the Bretonnians figured that there were better places for their troops to be and that the Field Trebuchet wouldn't get too much work done once the front lines met anyway. So perhaps not a bad call overall, but you can see these Knights of the Lionhearted have taken a fair bit of damage from Melkot's Mystifying Miasma, and now they're being shot at by the Reaper Bolt Thrower as well, it seems like. And you can see we've got the full frontline engagements about to begin. The Cold One Chariot over here pushes right through the Holy Wardens of La Maisontal, tossing them back, trying to get towards the Peasant Bowmen, I think, but more or less instantaneous response from the Knights of the Lionhearted here, pushing in from the sides of the Cold One Chariot. We also have Louan-Leoncoeur coming in from the rear, hoping to pin the Cold One Chariot down in place right now and take care of it immediately. That Cold One Chariot is very threatening. It's got armor piercing in range and in melee, and it's anti-infantry in melee as well, so good call over there. While over here you can see we have Slaanesh Harvesters pushing in towards the Peasant Mob, I think also trying to get towards the Peasant Bowmen over here, but having to go through these other Peasant Brethren of theirs, and just tossing back some of these Peasant Mob and doing some fair work over there, needing to creep right through. But of course, Slaanesh Harvesters here have a lot of physical resistance, so they will do just fine against some mere peasants. And at the same time, we also have these Cold One Knights pushing through towards the Peasant Bowmen. We have these Cold One Knights trying to struggle their way through these Dread Spears to get in towards, I think, the Men-at-Arms over here. But again, passing through your own units will slow you down, so you can see we have the Grail Knights with enough time to respond and get in over here and plug this gap and maybe shut down these Cold One Knights, while back here to the right you can see we have these Dread Spears trying to, I think, get through towards the Peasant Bowmen, but being stuck in place by the Peasant Mob, so the Peasant Bowmen are able to still fire freely. And look at the Reaper Bolt Throwers. They've already both dropped to about 50% health, very low on health. They still have a lot of their ammo left to go, but the Peasant Bowmen have done a wonderful job in trying to shut that down. While back here you can see the Cold One Knights are able to push right through, right past these Peasant Mob and Slaanesh Harvesters and get into the Peasant Bowmen over here, but they have to be wary of these Foot Squires that are closing the gap right away. And you can see the Cold One Knights then turn around and try to get involved in this central situation where Louan-Leoncoeur is still chasing after the Cold One Chariot. We have the Holy Wardens of La Maisontal, as well as the Damsel of Life and the Knights of the Lionhearted trying to deal with these Dread Spears, but the Dread Spears are causing some trouble for the Knights of the Lionhearted, and as these anti-large Cold One Knights come in from the rear as well, these Knights of the Lionhearted are not going to have a good time whatsoever. You can see over here we have Slaanesh Harvesters pulling back in the center. Over here we get Soul Stealer activated as well, causing a fair bit of damage to this massive clump of units as these Cold One Knights are trying to take care of the Peasant Bowmen. We have these Grail Knights pushing in, but they get intercepted by these Cold One Knights over here, so beautiful work over there, just pinning down all of these Grail Knights, holding them in place. To the left, though, you can see we have the Cold One Knights being pinned down in place by the Grail Knights instead, who were able to push in and intercept them after they hit the Men-at-Arms, and now the Cold One Knights are rampaging, so they're stuck in a melee engagement that they simply cannot win. Meanwhile, back in the center over here, you can see we do have Louan-Leoncoeur hit by the Word of Pain, reducing his melee attack significantly right down to 12, but in response he does have the Sword of Guron activated, reducing melee defense and armor in the area around him, while to the side here you can see we do have these Grail Knights being hit by Melkot's Mystifying Miasma, again slowing them down so they're not able to respond to the evolving situation as quickly, and also causing some damage, trying to get rid of that very threatening magical damage output and cavalry that the Bretonnians have brought to the field. Meanwhile, here you can see the Witch Elves seemingly trying to close the gap in towards Louan-Leoncoeur. Again, he's been hit by Word of Pain, so now might be the time to get him to rampage, get him stuck in against some of these Dread Spears. And again, the Witch Elves don't really rely that much on armor. They've got a fair bit of physical resistance, so the reduction in armor isn't going to matter to them, and the reduction in melee defense, while it will affect them, won't affect them as badly perhaps as some other troops. Meanwhile, back here you can see these Dark Riders are trying to push forward and get some interception work done of their own, trying to get into these Peasant Bowmen over here and get a nice rear charge, shut these guys down once and for all perhaps, and we get the Enfeebling Foe activated on King Louan-Leoncoeur at the same time, just completely reducing his capabilities. While back on the left flank over here you can see we actually get the Pit of Shades. You saw that bright blue flash of the Pit of Shades being activated, and just as these Cold One Knights are about to give up on the fight and completely die off, we get these Grail Knights hit by that Pit of Shades. And Regrowth is doing a fair bit of work in keeping them alive already, even as the Pit of Shades comes in. That replenishment of hit points is going to do a lot of work here, trying to keep these Grail Knights alive, so good work there using the Pit of Shades against someone who's getting that physical resistance through Regrowth, but they do try to get away immediately. Unfortunately, a bunch of them stuck in, of course, because of that Vortex spell. In comes Murderous Mastery and Murderous Prowess, doing a lot of work for the Dark Elves. You can see on that right flank these Peasant Mob finally dying off, but the Peasant Bowmen were able to do a lot of work despite these Dread Spears being right there, because of those Peasant Mob willing to hold the line for so long. Meanwhile, in the center over here you can see we got the Cold One Knights getting a nice rear charge into these Grail Knights over here, but Earthblood Upgraded gets popped over here, trying to keep these guys alive, trying to keep all of these units fighting, but you can see routes coming in for the Holy Wardens of La Maisontal and the Grail Knights as well. They're not willing to stick around and fight. The Cold One Knights did a lot of work over there. Slaanesh Harvesters as well doing a fair bit of work work, but of course, King WH2 is able to cause some damage through all of that. The Witch Elves over here trying to poke and prod away, I think, at King WH2, while you can see a little bit of aggression over here on the right flank as the Peasant Bowmen finally give up on the fight. The Men-at-Arms as well, very close to giving up on the fight, and you can see as one unit of Reaper Bolt Thrower seems to be doing nothing back there, this other unit of Reaper Bolt Thrower is looking for an opportunity to fire at something currently obstructed, but still trying to get rid of some of these Peasant Bowmen over here. Might have been a good idea to turn around and fire at these Peasant Bowmen because they are active right now and shooting, but I think hoping to turn these routes into shatters perhaps, as back here you can see we've got these Dark Riders chasing down some other Peasant Bowmen, hoping to do the same. Just turn these routes into shatters perhaps, and now pushing in towards these Holy Wardens of La Maison-Tal. Get a nice rear charge in there, perhaps take care of that magical damage output once and for all. You can see a beautiful charge over there, tossing them back and doing a fair bit of work, while in the center over here you can see once more we get Earthblood activated. We have these poor unfortunate Knights of the Lionhearted very much in a terrible situation. We have WH2 trying to take care of the Supreme Sorceress right now. She has put herself in a very precarious spot right now. She has to pull back into safety, half health, half morale, not a good spot whatsoever, and you can see WH2 hit by the enfeebling foe, once more reducing his melee attack and melee defense, but he is still able to terrify the Supreme Sorceress and cause a great deal of damage over there. He pulls back into safety, gets away from all of these anti-large units, gets up into the air as well. Over here you can see these Dread Spears trying to push in towards the Peasant Bowmen. I think the Damsel tried to intercept and get them their way, but unfortunately just not able to slow them down or stop them, and so the Peasant Bowmen actually need to pull back into safety, as we also have these Cold One Knights and these Dread Spears trying to close the gap over here. And you can see WH2 diving in towards the Supreme Sorceress, trying to take care of that magical support once and for all, trying to take care of that Dark Elf leadership once and for all, getting a nice charge in there, dropping her health and morale right down to slivers. There's like 5% health left, 5% morale left, and as you can see, the Supreme Sorceress immediately decides to completely give up on the fight and shatter as these Cold One Knights close the gap here, try to get some work in on King WH2, who immediately pops Foe Seeker and tries to get out of this precarious situation. You can see the Reaper Bolt over here turning their attention to these Men-at-Arms now, focusing in on a unit that still has 50% health and can still cause some trouble, especially when it comes to morale damage. And you can see over here we have these Dread Spears trying to close the gap towards WH2, who in turn is trying to close the gap, I think, towards these Cold One Knights, as well as these Dread Spears just scare everything off over here, while another Earthblood comes down to keep these Grail Knights as well as WH2 alive. But WH2 is at his regen cap over here at about 75% of total health, so he's going to be in trouble if he takes too many risks now, while in the center here you can see these Foot Squires completely giving up on the fight, and the Reaper Bolt over here continues to fire away, I think, at the Men-at-Arms, and now wants to switch targets once more, focusing in on WH2 instead, needing to switch to their anti-large equipment as WH2 dives into the central engagement over here. All of these Cold One Knights rampaging, they get hit by the Sword of Guhan, that's going to reduce their melee defense significantly, reduce their armor as well, but they have to fight WH2 here, sort of forced in by their rampaging there to dive in on WH2, who is more than happy to take them out, the Cold One Knights as well as the Cold One Chariot over here. The Cold One Chariot immediately gets terrified and begins to rout. The Cold One Knights aren't that far off from doing the same either, but we have the Helleburnai pushing in for a nice rear charge into WH2, and we have these Dread Spears as well. Just a handful of them that are left willing to push in and try and take care of Bretonnian leadership. That is crucial right now. You can see WH2 at about 50% morale, but he's able to drive right through these terrified Dread Spears and try to take to the air once more as they completely shatter and give up on the fight. Off to the side, meanwhile, you can see we have these Men-at-Arms still alive, still willing to close the gap to something. Might have been a good idea to push them in towards the Reaper Bolt Thrower over here, as the Reaper Bolt Thrower is now working away at WH2, just slowly chipping away at his health with their anti-large bolts. And you can see back here we have the Peasant Bowmen once more ready to fire away. They're getting some shots into these Dread Spears over here, who are working away at the Damsel of Life, getting hurt or up, but you can see we have these Dark Riders over here as well, pushing in, trying to get these Peasant Bowmen to give up on the fight once and for all. Again, good call. You want to eliminate range support as quickly as possible, because not only can it do damage to health, but it can also do damage to morale, and that can be absolutely devastating, especially in the later stages of a battle. So beautiful rear charges there, just tossing these peasants around, doing a lot of damage to health and morale, hoping to scare them off once and for all. Now you can see WH2 over here looking for an opportunity to get involved as well. A lot of anti-large on the ground here from the Dark Elves, so WH2 does have to be very careful, needs to be very picky as to where he goes and where he picks a fight. And you can see the Reaper Bolt continues to fire away at him, doing just a little bit of damage over time, but that can be more than enough, of course. And meanwhile, over here you can see the Dark Riders now pushing in towards these Men-at-Arms, trying to eliminate them as they are pinned in place by these Dread Spears. So a nice rear charge over here is going to do a lot of work here, getting those Men-at-Arms to give up more or less instantaneously. So beautifully done, but you can see WH2 has his sights set on these Dark Riders. He's actually chasing after them, pulling off into safety over here, I think preempting some shots from the Reaper Bolt Thrower, maybe opting to dive into some of these Cold One Knights instead temporarily as they kind of leave themselves exposed. A good charge over there, dropping their health, dropping their morale as well. A couple shots still coming in from the Reaper Bolt Thrower here, doing a little bit of damage as the Dread Spears as well poke and prod away, but the Dread Spears ultimately get terrified off as WH2 takes to the air once more. And again, looking for an opportunity to dive in somewhere. Might have been a good idea to actually dive right into the Reaper Bolt Thrower over here and take care of that artillery piece, because it's kind of left in the open, but instead deciding once more to dive right back into this clump, because again, these nearly full health Helleborni will do a lot of work against some mere peasant mob, and even against the foot squires who they outnumber so significantly. So LeonCoeur decides to come in over here, get a nice side charge, and even the odds a little bit. Let's put it that way. He decides to come in and even the odds. And meanwhile, as he's doing that, you can see we have over here these men-at-arms being absolutely pummeled by the Dark Riders with shields, and we have the Damsel of Life willing to return to the fight once more. Now, the Dread Spears, I think, were on the Damsel of Life. They should have stayed on her and actually tried to eliminate her completely, because that's a fair bit of magical support, replenishment support coming in, and if the Dark Elves are able to remove all of the ground units of the Bretonnians, then LeonCoeur will be forced to land and fight, and even though he might enjoy doing that, it will drop his morale, and it will limit how much the Bretonnians can actually do up in the air. But unfortunately, you can see the Damsel of Life being given another lease on life, as these Dark Riders as well have to pull back into safety as LeonCoeur tries to close the gap over here. And now again, you can see he has his sights set on this cavalry unit over here, trying to close the gap as quickly as possible, while these Dread Spears, I think, trying to push in towards the Damsel of Life, or perhaps just trying to get a little bit closer to these Dark Riders over here, so that when LeonCoeur ultimately comes in to attack them, they might be able to respond. But you can see LeonCoeur over here, just hovering above, dives right in, and immediately the Dark Riders get terrified. Of course, they do not want to stay and fight against LeonCoeur, and immediately you can see LeonCoeur turns around and dives into the Reaper Bolt Thrower crew over here, also very quick to give up on the fight, immediately terrified. The Dread Spears try to close the gap in on LeonCoeur, but just not able to do much, as he is able to turn around and take to the air more or less immediately. The Reaper Bolt Thrower, though, continues to get some shots and continues to get some damage in as well, slowly chipping away at his health. As you can see, we have nothing but the leader himself and the Damsel of Life willing to fight right now. We've got everybody else from Bretonnia on the route, giving up on the fight, pulling back into the safety of their farms, way off in the distance, way off in the distance, and LeonCoeur and the Damsel of Life are the only ones here who are fighting for the lady still. You can see LeonCoeur is looking for an opportunity to get involved. Once again, he has to be very careful, because there's a lot of anti-large on the field right now, but what the Dark Elves aren't doing is positioning themselves to get a full surround on LeonCoeur. Again, he's on this massive mount that's able to push right through any infantry unit, so he will be able to take to the air rather readily, but if he does get surrounded and pinned down and poked and prodded, he will get stuck on the ground, and his morale will drop very quickly as well. Now, that's wishful thinking, but that's the least the Dark Elves can do over here. You can see, though, using Foe Seeker right now to close the gap towards these Dark Riders, again insisting on shutting down this cavalry unit so it's not able to come in for rear charges later on or shut down the Damsel of Life. Not a bad call whatsoever, using that Foe Seeker again to get that speed advantage right up to 124. The 92 of the Dark Riders is not going to be enough at all, as LeonCoeur dives down, gets a nice rear charge, and more or less immediately gets these guys to give up on the fight as well. You can see wavering right now, and there's the route. King LeonCoeur now needs to look at another place to get involved, while back here you can see the Dread Spears finally chipping away at the Damsel of Life once more. The Damsel of Life tries to use Earthblood, but unfortunately, I think, just intercepted there, or interrupted there, I should say, and you can see her morale is extremely low, her health is extremely low as well, so the Dread Spears are getting some work done over here, but unfortunately, as LeonCoeur comes in, the Damsel turns around and gets some fighting done as well. In comes LeonCoeur, pops the Sword of Couronne as well, reducing melee defense significantly over here, and of course, with spears, you get a fairly high melee defense to begin with, so they still have a little bit left, and again, LeonCoeur now taken to the air, circling around, coming in for another cycle charge over here, getting a beautiful charge into these Dread Spears over here, once more doing a lot of work, bringing in that fear, bringing in that terror, dropping the morale, dropping their will to fight. And you can see the Helleborni here just trying to, I think, wait for LeonCoeur to leave, or maybe they were bracing for his charge. Unfortunately, he decided to pick off these Dread Spears instead, takes to the air once more, maybe chasing these Dread Spears off, hoping to get these routes to turn into shadows, I think. Well, over here you can see the Damsel of Life just, again, peeling away from these Helleborni who are poking and prodding, trying to get her to give up on the fight and maybe get LeonCoeur in a bit of a rough spot. You can see the Reaper Bolt Thrower artillery crew here, I think, completely out of ammunition, nothing else they can really do, low on health, low on morale, not much left for them, but LeonCoeur, again, being very hesitant, being very careful about how he charges in, comes in from the side over here, doesn't want to get in from the front, but the Helleborni here immediately respond, hoping to fight in the trees over here to get that penalty applied to LeonCoeur as well. Fighting in the trees, of course, reduces the fighting capabilities of large units, and I think pulling back into the safety of these trees to take advantage of that situation. Not a bad call at all, but of course, LewandLawg was able to just pull back and take to the air once more. You can see we have the Reaper Bolter over here, completely shattered as well. The Hellebrenai need to be very careful, bracing again for impact. In comes LewandLawg, tossing a couple of these Hellebrenai back, and again getting caught up in this melee engagement. The Hellebrenai are not having a good time at all. LewandLawg once more pulling back into safety. In comes Foeseeker as well to keep him running smoothly, running quickly. Vigor is up as well, and you can see, I think, the Damsel of Life trying to pop an Earthblood repeatedly on LewandLawg, but constantly being interrupted over here by move orders and by pokes and prods from the Hellebrenai. But ultimately, there isn't much that the Dark Elves can do right now. We've got these Dread Spears returning to the fight. We've got these Dark Riders willing to fight once more, but with the Hellebrenai now completely routing, very close to shattering. I'm sure if they get chased down, the Dark Elves do have to give up on the fight. And you can see we've got these Dread Spears as well, giving up on the fight, terrified off, and a Pyrrhic victory for the Bretonnians. While the series may have been 3-0 for Xiphos, the battles were all insanely close, often decided by a few clicks here and there, a missed ability or artillery inaccuracy. Overall, I think both commanders led well in all 3 battles, and we got to see some interesting picks, some clever counter strategies, and some fantastic management and battlefield awareness. I hope you enjoyed the set, and if so, let me know down below, and I might pursue more like it. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War content and keep sending in those battle replays. I do think it's one of the best ways to learn, and it's always nice to highlight such amazing battles from the community. I'd also like to thank all of my patrons for supporting the channel on a month-to-month basis, keeping us alive and running smoothly. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I'll see you on the battlefield.